When Jesus showed me the vast congregation of Christians bound in chains, I saw myself among them. The sin I thought was harmless, the one I even thought was part of my ministry, was actually sending millions to hell. What I discovered in those 8 minutes of death changed everything. My name is Martha Elizabeth Stevens. I'm 52 years old, and on July 4th, 2025, I died for 8 minutes during a church potluck. For 34 years, I was what everyone would call a model Christian. I mean, I was a Sunday school teacher, a volunteer coordinator, a woman who never, ever missed a service. I grew up in a Baptist preacher's home in a small town in Alabama, so church wasn't just something we did on Sundays. It was our whole life, you know? My mother, Ruth, was the perfect pastor's wife. She led the women's ministry, organized every church dinner, and seemed to know everyone's business. Now, looking back, I realized that knowing everyone's business was both her gift and her curse, and it eventually became mine, too. I accepted Jesus when I was 9 years old, and I meant it with my whole heart. I truly did. I met my husband, Robert, when I was 23, and we settled down in a little town called Millbrook. We became pillars of Grace Community Church. Robert was a deacon, and I threw myself into every ministry I could find. If you looked at us, you'd see the ideal Christian family. We gave, we served, we opened our home. Pastor Williams even used us as an example of what committed church members looked like. But here's the thing, and I have to be completely honest about this. There was a sin in my life that I never saw as a sin. In fact, I thought it was a part of my ministry. You see, I was the unofficial information hub of our church. People came to me when they wanted to know what was really going on. I knew whose marriage was in trouble, whose teenager was acting out, whose faith was getting shaky. And I told myself, that I needed this information so I could pray for people more effectively, so I could know how to help them. And sometimes that was true. But if I'm honest, more often than not, I was just sharing it. I'd say to my Bible study group, please pray for the Johnson family. I heard that Tom's been drinking again, and Susan just looked exhausted at church on Sunday. I'd even add details, like, I think they might be having money problems too. I saw her using food stamps at the grocery store. I convinced myself I was just being a caring Christian, but really I was gossiping. I was taking private, painful information that wasn't mine and spreading it all over our church, all while hiding it under the label of Christian concern. And the worst part is, it felt so normal. Everyone did it. We called it sharing prayer requests or keeping each other informed. No one, especially me, saw it for what it was. But Jesus was about to give me a terrifying reality check. That 4th of July, our church was having its big annual potluck. I'd helped organize it for years. The fellowship hall was buzzing. Over 200 people were there, and everyone was happy. After the meal, we all went into the sanctuary for the service. Pastor Williams was preaching about being set free from the bondage of sin. And that's when I noticed Lisa Morrison, a young mom in our church, sitting all alone with her 3 little kids. Her husband, Mark, wasn't with her, which was odd, and she just looked so stressed out. Without even thinking, I leaned over to my friend Carol and whispered, "Something's definitely wrong with the Morrisons. Mark never misses church, and look how worn out Lisa looks. I wonder if they're having marriage problems." Carol nodded and whispered back, "I noticed that too. And she's lost so much weight." We kept on like that, whispering and speculating, telling ourselves we were just being observant and caring. It was right then that I felt it, a sharp pain in my chest. It got worse, fast, shooting down my arm and into my jaw. I knew exactly what it was, a heart attack. I tried to get Robert's attention, but I couldn't even speak. The last thing I remember was slumping over in the pew, right as the pastor was reading from Galatians about the freedom we have in Christ. My heart had stopped. For 8 minutes, I was clinically dead. During those 8 minutes, while everyone in the sanctuary was panicking and the paramedics were working on my lifeless body, I wasn't there anymore. I was standing in a place filled with the most incredible beauty and light. It wasn't a harsh, blinding light, It was a warm, living light that seemed to pulse with pure love and truth. All the pain was gone. I felt completely peaceful, more awake, and alive than I had ever been in my entire life. And that's when I saw him. Jesus was standing right in front of me, and he was magnificent. I mean, nothing like the paintings I'd seen my whole life. He radiated a pure holiness and a divine authority that just buckled my knees. I couldn't do anything but fall down before him. When he looked at me, I felt two things at once. I was completely wrapped in a perfect, unconditional love, but at the same time, every little lie and excuse I'd ever hidden behind was just gone. He saw everything. "Martha," he said. Hearing my own name from his lips felt like coming home to a place I'd always been searching for, but never knew existed. "Lord," I whispered, and for the first time, I think I really understood what that word meant. I was expecting comfort, a welcome. But instead, he asked me a question that felt like a sword going straight through my soul. "Martha, do you know why so many who call themselves mine still lose their way?" Before I could even try to answer, the beautiful light around us changed. Suddenly, I was looking at what seemed to be a giant church service, an enormous congregation of thousands upon thousands of people. And they were all Christians, I could just tell. They were singing worship songs, their hands were raised in praise. They were carrying Bibles, wearing crosses on their necks, and I could even see them posting encouraging Bible verses on their phones. From far away, it looked like a beautiful picture of the global church. It looked right. But as Jesus guided my eyes closer, I started to see something that made my heart freeze in my chest. It was horrifying. Every single person in that massive crowd was bound by chains. Not physical chains of metal, but spiritual ones. They were wrapped around their mouths, their necks, and even their hearts. And the chains themselves, they weren't made of iron or steel. They were made of words. "Look closer," Jesus said to me, his voice so gentle. As I focused on the people, I could actually read the words that formed the links in their chains. Asterisk gossip, slander, criticism, judgment, rumors, harsh words, asterisk each careless comment, each cruel joke, each bit of information shared that shouldn't have been. Every single one was another link in a chain, making it heavier and tighter. But the most shocking part was that the people didn't even seem to know they were in chains. They just kept on with their worship, their service, their Christian activities, completely unaware that their own words had become their prison. "This is the sin of the tongue," Jesus explained, and his voice was filled with this incredible sorrow and urgency. "Careless speech, gossip, slander, criticism. They think it's small, harmless, even innocent. But it destroys love, divides my people, and sends millions into bitterness and unbelief." As I kept watching, Jesus showed me closer views of what was happening, and it broke my heart. I watched a woman in a Bible study, and she was sharing a prayer request about her neighbor's marriage problems, but she was giving all these little details that were not hers to share. And with every word she spoke, I saw another glowing link add itself to the chain around her neck. Then the scene shifted. I saw a man at a church business meeting, and he was criticizing the pastor's sermon, questioning his dedication with these carefully worded concerns. The chains around his mouth just got thicker and heavier with every sentence. I saw a group of teenagers at youth group making fun of another kid's clothes, trying to make it sound like they were just joking around, but their cruelty was obvious. And the spiritual chains just wrapped tighter and tighter around their hearts with every laugh. But the most heartbreaking part was seeing what these words did to the people they were about. I watched as marriages were literally destroyed by gossip that spread through a church like wildfire. I saw entire churches split apart, not because of some big disagreement about the Bible, but because of hurt feelings and reputations that were ruined by careless words. I saw good, faithful people who loved the Lord, just walk away from church and from their faith completely because they couldn't stand the constant judgment and criticism from other believers. The very people who should have been their biggest cheerleaders were the ones driving them away. "Every idle word will be accounted for," Jesus said, and his voice held the weight of absolute, final truth. "What looks harmless in the moment carries eternal weight. My people do not see it, but their careless words are tools in the enemy's hands." Then he showed me something even more disturbing. I watched as each careless word was like a tiny spark falling on dry grass. These sparks started spiritual fires that burned through families and entire churches. A single innocent conversation about someone's private struggle could lead that person to fall into despair and walk away from God forever. "Look at yourself, Martha," Jesus said. And just like that, I was watching my own life, but from his perspective. I saw myself through the years, patting myself on the back for being such a caring Christian, all while spreading information that wasn't mine to share. I saw how my so-called concerns about other church members had planted seeds of doubt and division in dozens, maybe hundreds of conversations. Then I saw Lisa Morrison again, the young mom I was gossiping about right before I died. Jesus showed me the truth. Her husband, Mark, wasn't absent because they were having marriage problems. He was deployed overseas with the National Guard, and she'd asked the church to keep it private for security reasons. She was so tired and stressed because she was trying to raise 3 little kids all by herself while being terrified for her husband's safety in a combat zone. My speculation, those few thoughtless words whispered to Carol, had been completely wrong. But I watched in absolute horror as I saw those words spread through the church in the weeks that followed, twisting and growing, adding an even heavier burden to Lisa's shoulders and making her feel judged and totally alone. "This is why she stopped coming to church," Jesus said, his voice filled with sadness. The place that should have been her refuge became another source of pain because of careless words. I was on my face before him, just weeping. The damage I had caused, the pain I had inflicted without ever meaning to hurt anyone. It was just overwhelming. "Lord, I didn't know," I sobbed. "I truly thought I was helping. I thought I was being a caring Christian." "The heart is desperately wicked," he replied, but there was compassion in his voice. "You convinced yourself that your curiosity was compassion, that your gossip was concern, that your judgment was discernment. But the tongue is a fire, Martha, and you have been setting blazes throughout my church." He then showed me the spiritual reality behind it all. I saw demons, real evil spirits, gathering around every conversation where Christians spoke carelessly about each other. These beings were feeding on the division and hurt feelings. I could see them whispering suggestions into people's ears. "Did you hear what she said about you? You should tell someone else about this. You have a right to defend yourself." The enemy was using our own words, the words of believers, to tear apart the very unity that Jesus prayed for. The church wasn't being weakened by attacks from the outside, but by poison from the inside. "This is why so many lose their way," Jesus said, finally answering his own question. "They come to my church seeking love, acceptance, and truth. Instead, they find judgment, gossip, and cruelty disguised as Christian concern. They see my people behaving no differently than the world, and they conclude that I make no real difference. What can I do?" I pleaded, my heart completely broken. "How can I ever make this right?" "First," Jesus said, "you must truly repent. Not just feel sorry for the consequences, but grieve over the sin itself. Recognize that your careless words have wounded my body and hindered my kingdom." As he spoke, the full weight of my sin hit me. I had been a tool in the enemy's hands while thinking I was doing God's work. "I'm so sorry," I cried out. "I know," he said with infinite compassion. "And that's why I'm sending you back. Not to condemn you, but to warn others. This sin is so subtle, so normalized, so wrapped in religious language that few recognize it for what it is." He placed his hand on my head, and a flood of pure forgiveness washed through me, cleansing the guilt and shame and replacing it with a holy determination to make things right. "Tell my people," he commanded, "that I am calling them to guard their tongues. Tell them that love covers a multitude of sins, but gossip exposes them unnecessarily. Their words have the power to build up or tear down, to heal or to wound." He showed me one last vision. It was that same massive congregation, but now many of them were free. The chains were broken. They were speaking words of life and encouragement to each other. I saw churches that were thriving, drawing people to Christ instead of driving them away, all because they had learned to use their tongues for blessing instead of cursing. "Remember, Martha." His voice followed me as I felt myself being pulled back toward the world, back toward my body. Every word matters. Every conversation is an opportunity to spread life or death. Choose life. I came to consciousness with a gasp. I was in the cardiac unit, machines beeping all around me, and Robert's worried face was the first thing I saw. The doctors were stunned. Dr. Johnson, who had been in the service, kept shaking her head. "Martha," she said, looking at my charts, "you were gone for 8 minutes. Your heart was completely stopped. You should have significant brain damage, but your cognitive functions are perfect. It's medically impossible." But I knew it was a miracle. God had sent me back for a reason. The first words out of my mouth were weak, but urgent. I have to tell everyone. We have to guard our tongues. Our words are destroying the church. Over the next few days in the hospital, as my body healed, I began the much harder work of processing what I'd seen. I had to face the ugly truth that I'd been sinning for decades while believing I was serving God. My first step had to be confession. I called Lisa Morrison and asked if I could see her. When I got to her home, I saw the exact stress and exhaustion Jesus had shown me. "Lisa," I said, with tears just streaming down my face, "I need to ask for your forgiveness. I've been gossiping about your family, speculating about your situation. I was wrong, and I am so sorry." She looked shocked. "Mrs. Stevens, I didn't even know you were talking about us." "That's the problem," I told her. I violated your privacy, and I hurt you without you even knowing it." Lisa started to cry. "That explains so much," she said. "I felt like people were judging me, like they thought I was a bad mother. I felt so isolated." Instead of just talking about her, I finally asked how I could actually help her. That one conversation led to our church creating a real support system for military families, with practical help like childcare and meals, not just gossip disguised as prayer. Next, I went to Pastor Williams and confessed my pattern of gossip. At first, he was careful, you know. He said, "Martha, don't you think you're being a little hard on yourself? Sharing prayer requests is part of ministry." "Pastor," I replied, "Jesus showed me the difference between genuine concern and gossip disguised as ministry. What I was doing was not ministry. It was sin." I told him everything. He was skeptical, but as I described how our gossip had directly hurt people like Lisa, he started to see it. "You know," he said slowly, "we've lost several families over the years because they felt judged. I always just assumed they were being oversensitive." That talk led to Pastor Williams preaching a whole series of sermons on the power of our words. The reaction was immediate, and it was divided. Some people got defensive, saying I was just traumatized and making everyone feel guilty for a normal Christian conversation. But others were deeply convicted. My friend Carol, the one I had been whispering with, came to me with tears in her eyes and repented, admitting she'd been doing the same thing for years. Our church began to change. Our Bible study stopped being a gossip session and became a place of real prayer. We made new rules. Prayer requests had to come directly from the person involved. The whole atmosphere of our church became safer, and people started coming back. People who had been driven away by the judgment and gossip. I began sharing my story at other churches, and the message wasn't always popular. But for every person who resisted, there was another who heard the truth. I received letters from people all over the country who realized they'd been participating in the sin of gossip without ever recognizing it. I now understand that following Jesus isn't just about showing up to church. It's about letting him transform every single part of you, especially how you use your words. I've gone from being the information hub to being a conversation guardian. When a conversation starts to turn toward gossip, I gently stop it. "Let's just pray for them without discussing the details," I'll say. It hasn't been easy. It required constant vigilance to retrain my own heart and mind. But my relationships are more real now. Our church is a place of healing. And I understand what the Bible means when it says the tongue is a fire. It can start blazes that destroy everything, or it can be used to speak words of life that heal, restore, and build up the body of Christ. The choice is ours in every single conversation. My question for you is, what kind of fruit are your words producing? Are they drawing people to Jesus or driving them away? Because he is listening to every single word.